Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Aether Hub and another Magic the Gathering video. Today we're continuing the main storyline found in Kaldheim, with what I believe is the conclusion to this set's story in Chapter 5. It's been a nice, fairly paced out story thus far, with a lot of loose ends to wrap up, so this is likely going to be a pretty long one, so sit back and get ready for some sweet lore. In fact, it's going to be so long that I'm likely going to split this up into two separate parts, just so it's pretty more reasonable to watch in terms of length and doesn't drag on for like an hour or so. So go ahead and consider this part 1 of 2 for the conclusion of Kaldheim. But first, a quick little recap on where we are in the story thus far, as in Chapter 4, our heroes, Kaya and Tyvar successfully ventured to Immersturm, the realm of demons, and managed to confront Tibalt, learning of his ultimate plans for Kaldheim. Of course, Kaya managed to piece it all together just before Tyvar essentially beat Tibalt to a bloody pulp, with the devilish Planeswalker ultimately getting the final laugh, watching as Kaya's eyes turned hopeless as they witnessed the giant scar Tibalt had left in the veil that separated the realms. Using the Sword of the Realms, he managed to bring forth a Doomskar, which now saw countless demons pouring into unsuspecting realms. Though Kaya wanted to fall into old habits, cutting her losses on Kaldheim and hightailing it out of there, Tyvar managed to speak some courage into the Ghost Assassin as they go together in search of allies that can end this Doomskar. And when you're talking about something this big in terms of cataclysmic consequences, you're gonna have to turn to the gods. We now follow Kaya and Tyvar as they enter the beloved realm of Bredegar, the realm of humans, as they seek to undo the damage that Tibalt has unleashed on Kaldheim. There's your quick recap, and another reminder that if you haven't yet seen the entire video series on Kaldheim's story, that you can find my playlist linked in the description below so you can get all caught up. And right before we begin, just another reminder that you can support our content by leaving this video a like, subscribing, and ticking the notification bell. And you can also support us over on Patreon. It's by far the best way in terms of supporting us, but you get a lot of other perks along with that support, things like these videos early, monthly signed cards, and your name at the end of each of my videos. You can go ahead and check out those and all the other perks by checking the link in the description below. And with that, let's get back to the lore. The gentle, fresh, typically warm air of Bredegar, realm of the human clans, had become choked with the stench of war. Blood, visceral, fire, all seemed to taint the typically tranquil hills and valleys that made up the Elderguard. This was the place Kaya had started her journey, her mission from an unknown client to slay a monster which soon found her involved in an inter-realm conflict started by a Planeswalker for nothing more than the purity that came with chaos. Kaya hadn't always been a hero. She was first and foremost an assassin, taking jobs without thought or remorse. But after witnessing this group of heroes, the Gatewatch, in action, she aspired to be more. While in her eyes, Kaldheim looked doomed, thinking back to the scores of demons seemingly unending descending into foreign realms, she knew this is where she had to stay, for as long as she could. This is what she needed for her to be the hero she now wished to call herself. The humans of Kaldheim aren't as physically imposing or magically inclined as some of the other races in the other realms, but what they lacked in those categories they made up in tenacity and cooperation. An ominous raven had brought word of a battle raging, as the fellow clans had been called together to meet this generational threat. Demons in Bredegar for the first time in centuries, ever since Varagoth turned the skies red with blood, only to be stopped and imprisoned in Immersturm thanks to the intervention of the gods. No single human clan could ever hope to stop such a force alone. Even together they had no real chance. Still, they meet to discuss their plans all the same, bringing together some of the greatest heroes and legends of this modern age. Sitting together at a great table made of oak were leaders of the various clans. There was Arnie Brokenbrow of the Tuskiri, Finn the Fangbearer of the Kana, Sigrid the God-Favored, Ingaroon Eyes, leader of the Omen Seekers, and of course, two foreigners, Kaya and an elf, Tyvar. As the Raven came to settle on an open windowsill, the group discussed their plan of attack. Basically, how could they even survive to the next week? The clans have always had issues with one another, but it was mostly bluster, or disputes of what feats laid claim to who. But one thing many of the human clans could agree on, and this counts especially for the Kana, was their hatred for elves. Elves weren't common in their realm, although their magic did allow them to travel here on occasion. What they knew of the elves were that they did not like the Skodi, the current gods of Kaldheim, who seemed to favor humans over many of the other races. With that wedge, Finn and Tyvar didn't get off on the right foot. There were loads of threats, stances of intimidation, but Tyvar never backed down. In truth, Finn wouldn't stand a chance in a one-on-one fight, but this was no time to make that truth known. Finn, of course, was a celebrated warrior in his clan, the Fangbearer as he was known. Having slayed a great serpent, an offspring of the cosmos monster Koma, the humans feared this great beast, as it was their gods who locked it away from Bredegard out of fear. The same Koma the elves now worshipped as their own pseudo-deity. Finn hates snakes, and the forked-tongue-loving elves, as he put it. But this was no time for squabbles. They were staring down a force never before seen in any realm. They could fight next week, if they lived that long. Sigrid ended the stalemate to reaffirm what they faced. It wasn't just demons. Tibalt had cut tears into each of the realms. Currently, their forces have spotted demons, giants, both frost and fire, trolls, and even Draugr, the Dread Marn, foot soldiers of Karfel's dead army. The only chance they had lies in the hands of this Kaya and Tyvar, a weapon of dazzling light, the light of the gods. They carried with them the Sword of the Realms. It was a blade forged by the legendary dwarven smith Cole, meant for the god of battle, Halvar. That was before Tibalt stole it and killed Cole for his trouble. None here knew how to wield this weapon, the very weapon responsible for the Doomskar in the first place. But perhaps Halvar could use it to undo this mess, to finally end this madness. The pesky raven in the corner now bathed in a glorious light, a mix of deep blues and greens as a haggard old form takes its place. The humans gathered here are stunned to witness a true god among them, Alrund, the god who had helped Kaya on this mission at its start. Again, he appeared to provide his wisdom. He spoke to those less trusting of these foreigners that this sword could put the realms back in order. They only needed to find Halvar. But that's a task easier said than done. All Alrund knows is that his adopted son is out there in an open battle. He is the god of battle after all, but his exact location is still unknown. Alrund would help them travel to the thickest of the fighting. Surely, they would find Halvar there at the conflict center. Finding him on the ground would be their job. Before Alrund left, to aid some of the other realms being torn apart, he gifted the group 2 gigantic ravens on which to fly. And with that same glow, Alrund steps back through the cosmos. As Kaya, Tyvar, and Arnie, the brazen human who liked the odds stacked against him, fly upon the back of this great raven, they were treated with an icy chill that seemed to cut Kaya right to the bone. They also got an aerial view of the raging battle taking place below them. From the shimmering scar in the world, they could spot the endless shambling armies of Karfel, the reanimated dead those of Kaldheim called Draugr. Kaya knew these were just zombies by any other name. What gave her pause were the huge shapes seen smashing through the oaken shields of foot soldiers in long sweeping strikes. Torga trolls, exactly like the ones she had faced and nearly fell to when she first encountered Tibalt. It looked like the trolls and dead were working together, until Kaya squinted and could make out pieces of bone jetting from the rotted flesh of the trolls. They too were undead. Good, at least they'd be slower. What concerned Kaya the most was the striking lack of demons here. She and Tyvar saw hundreds jump through the rift. Where were they? Finally, she spotted some good news out there. A lone figure, a single man defending an old worn bridge from the Draugr forces. He had a pile of their corpses lined up in an arc around him. A fighter of legendary status, it had to be Halvar, their target. Who else but a god could hold this line against such a formidable force? Of course, with that spoken out loud, Arnie Brokenbrow took offense at that perceived slight. Just as Kaya was about to signal to the hopefully understanding Raven to lower them to the bridge, a sense of dread overtook them all, as a gigantic shadow blotted out the sun above them. With a terrible crash, amongst the sounds of leathery wings snapping fragile bones, the three heroes began to fall from the sky. Tyvar, for all his grace, flailed helplessly, grabbing at air, while Arnie bellowed a war cry as if he was going to survive this fall and jump right into the thick of battle. He was clearly mad. Kaya tried to focus on her breathing. The rushing air made it hard for her to concentrate. As quickly as she could, she began to angle herself, turning her body into a spear to speed up to Arnie, then widening her arms and legs to slow down and reach Tyvar. She cut it all very close. Barely 5 seconds before impact with the ground, she turns them all incorporeal as they crash into the waters of a shallow river. Their bodies were unharmed, but Tyvar and Arnie had never experienced this magic before. They were dazed, but looking up from the water, they saw they were in the same river which Halvar's bridge crossed. They were close, but still an army of Draugr stood between them, and the demon above had finally joined the fray. This was going to be a fight. Arnie was the first to snap to, the thrill of battle boiling his blood. Arnie had always been the one to take stupid risks. He's always lived to tell the tales, or rather brag about the tales. It's what catapulted him into legend in Bredegard. Here he showed that same determination, telling the group that he would hack his way through the undead horde and draw their slow-moving ranks away from an easier path they could take to Halvar. With a loud scream, Arnie jumped in, and wherever he went, limbs seemed to fly up around him. Kaya knew he was going to be just fine. Kaya saw the line they needed to take, but still, shambling corpses blocked their way, a never-ending legion of these damned zombies. She could have easily phased through them all in a mad dash, but using her power in the fall exhausted her. She had no idea if she could make it that far. Plus, she had Tyvar to worry about. She didn't want to just leave him here. Dodging from slow arcing attacks left and right, from all around them it seemed, Kaya with her twin light axes and Tyvar with his transmutation magic and wrist blades managed to ward off their attacks. But as quickly as one was dispensed, another seemed to take its place. They were going nowhere. But then, Kaya heard a horn. This was no Draugr horn, nor that of a human clan. Just over the hill, Kaya is almost blinded by the reflection of bronze shields and spears. It was a line of elves. They had joined the fight, but for whose side? Elves and men historically didn't see eye to eye, but no one sided with the armies of the dead. Had they walked through their realm's rift to fight everyone? This question was too important to be left unasked. If the elves attacked the Draugr and humans alike, feeding off the lies of Tibalt posing as Volki, then none of them would ever survive this day. Tyvar looks up and sees his brother, the king of the elves, the uniter of wood and shadow, standing at the front, riding his magnificent reindeer mount, looking as imposing as ever. Tyvar tells Kaya that he's going to talk with his brother. If he could just talk to him, he could make his brother see reason. Kaya agreed, and Tyvar ran off to confront Harold, king of the elves, his older brother. As Tyvar runs off, Kaya again makes her way towards the bridge. In front of her, the ground quakes with a massive stomp, as one of those damned undead Torga, who admittedly kicked her ass at the journey's start, lumbered forward. As Kaya was gearing up for an attack, something splashed out of the water and landed next to her. Kaya was shocked. It looked like a dolphin? Only it had this mysterious, otherworldly sheen to it, the glow of the gods. Shocking Kaya further, her jaw drops as the dolphin's form fades away, leaving a strong, middle-aged woman behind. Behind this woman, a wall of water formed the shape of an animal, large and imposing. It crashed down violently upon the Torga and a handful of other Draugr, washing them away. Kaya asks who this dolphin woman was supposed to be. She replies that Kaya was on her ship not too long ago. Had she already forgotten? Kaya could only think back of the magical longboat that carried her across the cosmos. Oh yeah, it was a brief encounter and not all that pleasant of a ride. The god turned and apologized for that, introducing herself as Kazuma, wife of Aldrun, the god of voyages. With this new powerful ally on her side, they again raced towards Halvar. As the armies of the other realms smashed into one another, it seemed there was always something bigger and meaner in their path. What scared Kaya the most was that demon, the huge one who had knocked her from the Raven. It was no lowly foot soldier in the demonic army. She had seen it before. The one Tyvar called Vargoth, the Blood Sky Sire. No one gets that sort of title from being reasonable or a pushover. This demon had once pierced the cosmos between the realms and terrorized Bredegard before. Now it looked like he was taking his revenge on the gods who locked him away in Immersturm. He and his flight could be seen in the distance, hideous monstrosities made of pure malice, swooping down and laying waste to the warriors below. Kaya didn't register that same foreboding shadow above her once again, as Vargoth caught the scent of a god and descended. Kaya was pulled away just in time as a crushing blow from the demon's axe barely misses the Planeswalker. Cosmo wasn't happy to see Vargoth again, and with the wings? He didn't have wings last time. This was going to be an interesting fight. Vargoth begins some menacing speech about never being trapped again, but it was interrupted by a decidedly pissed off Kaya, who tosses both of her axes at the demon's head, grazing his skull and causing bubbling tar-like blood to ooze forth. Kaya tells the demon that she's sure he's a real big, scary story for the people of Kaldheim to tell their children, but she isn't from around here and doesn't care. She stares down the being who shattered realms in legend, ready to become a hero. And there you guys have it, part 1 of our series finale for Kaldheim. I'm sorry if you guys were expecting everything in this last video, but I sat down and wrote out the entire script and it was unreasonably long, like just way too long. But don't worry though, we got plenty more on the story and the world of Kaldheim coming on the channel. We'll wrap up the official story in part 2, then go into the side stories and continue with the world building of Kaldheim, so don't you fret. Anyway, my thoughts on what we've learned so far in Chapter 5. Well, as I said at the video's start, this finale is really busy. Like, the pacing felt great, but as we came nearly to the end here, the writing had a lot of ground to cover, and despite it being much more, well, longer in length than the previous chapters, it still felt really rushed. We saw that a lot in part 1 here, with the gods, or at least Halvar and Cosima, finally appearing for the very first time, with none of the other gods even mentioned in the main story thus far. It just feels weird to have a plane with gods and have them so absent and removed from the set story, especially one that has the fate of the plane hanging in the balance. Regardless, the action in this chapter is really good, and it gives off a very heavy Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies sort of vibe, with the elves coming out of nowhere and no one quite sure of their intentions, if they're friend or foe. It's basically ripped right from that movie's screenplay. But I think that inspiration helped the story a lot here, because this is the first time we're seeing a lot of these super important characters, ones that we've kind of heard about, but this is our first real impactful meeting of them, and we really don't know how to perceive these characters outside of stories that we've heard. So it's important that this leaves a little bit of mystery to their intentions, and all that will be uncovered in part 2 of the finale. One thing I will say is that Kaya is really turning into a really cool character for me. The way she just doesn't care about this hulking demon of myth and legend, Vargoth, and just chucks her axes at him with no respect is really just an awesome moment. She's a planeswalker, so stories of Vargoth have really no sway on her opinion of this monster, but still, he's a massive threat that looks to test her commitment to being a hero, and that's really going to be expressed in part 2. Anyway guys, that's going to be it for part 1 of Kaldheim's conclusion. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and tick that notification bell so you know exactly when part 2 goes live here on the channel. Remember, you can also support our channel over on Patreon and be eligible for awesome perks like videos early, signed cards, and your name at the credits of my videos. Go ahead and check out all of those linked in the description below. And with that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!